So let's cultivate our motivation and return the mind again to contemplate the kindness of living beings and the fact that we have been a recipient of their kindness for a long, long time and will continue to be a recipient of their kindness for a long, long time. So even though sentient beings may do awful things, that's due to their being under the control of afflictions and karma. So even though that happens, they also benefit us. So not only by the work they do in society, so that we have all the material things that we need to stay alive, but also by the way that they took care of us when we were little and incapable of caring for ourselves. The fact that they educated us, taught us manners and how to get along with other people. And even the kindness that comes from the fact that they challenge us by sometimes disagreeing with us or insulting us. But if we look at all these challenges properly, we see that they are actually to our benefit because they help us grow. They help us develop new abilities to deal with difficulties that we didn't have before. So this is a good example of changing our perspective on sentient beings, and by doing so, changing our emotions and our feelings towards them. Because we come to see that although they're not 100% good, we really don't need to go through life being suspicious about them, but to open our eyes and see the benefits that we've continually received from them. And so in that way, not dismissing anybody. When we really look closely at the benefit we've received from sentient beings, then automatically we want to repay it. And of course, the best way to repay kindness is to be able to show living beings the path out of dukkha, the path out of samsara. And to do that, we need to actualize that path ourselves. And so we generate the bodhicitta to do that. So I think whenever there's sorrow in your heart or disillusionment or the threat of despair, that it's very important to balance our perspective by seeing the kindness of other living beings. Yeah. And like I said, even the kindness of the people who say and do things that we find frightening or disgusting. Yeah, because they really are challenging us to grow our capacity And the thing is, if we want to be bodhisattvas, we have to grow that capacity. It's not that when you're a bodhisattva, everybody's nice to you. And so it's easy, and so you don't need to really endure much. Yeah, because they're all nice. They give you scarves, white scarves. They give you tea. They give you some apples and oranges. Yeah, you think that's really nice. Yeah. They sit in the tea stall and talk about you. Yeah, doesn't that bring you great happiness? Yeah. So we see, that's not really what a bodhisattva's life is about. I mean, as bodhisattvas, you really have to be able to always have a positive outlook on everything, and to be able to respond to everything with a sense of compassion, so that you just don't get fed up and discouraged and say, these sentient beings are too much, leave me alone. So among my email yesterday was, I'm giving you an example of what I just said. There was an email from a group called Faithful America. It's a Christian group. I don't know how I got on their list. But they're a progressive group, and they really stand up when things are done in the name of Christianity that they don't consider ethical or fair or kind. They really stand up for that. So they sent around parts of a letter that had been sent out by 4,000 pastors to the progressive Christian groups, telling them that they should repent because their beliefs are leading the country astray, and that they should be aware of, among the different things they said, that George Soros is, behind this, all the invasion of the people from Central America, and George Soros is financing all this other kind of stuff that is, pro-abortion and pro-women and just everything, yeah? Soros and his allies, and, it's very clearly anti-Semitic, yeah? And I was, and then, just telling these other Christians that, they're not practicing their religion properly. And it kind of boiled down to, if you're going to be a good Christian, you have to be a Republican. It wasn't stated that succinctly, but with the positions that they were advocating, that's what it boiled down to. And I was really horrified. It's like, my goodness, how could they, all these pastors who are, supposedly following Jesus's life, in which he really stuck up for the poor and the oppressed and the underprivileged and the ill. And how could these people, say this kind of thing and have these kind of conspiracy theories that other people, the Jews are, funding all this stuff against guns and, everything. And so that feeling of horror still remains in my mind, But then I also have to look and say, Lama Yeshe used to always say to us, they means well, dear. Yeah? So that sentient beings may do all sorts of things, but they mean well. It's just that they're confused, and ignorance. And, so to remember that. And then to remember that also these people work in all sorts of jobs in the country. And the fact that, I have a microphone may be due to their working in a factory or place that designed and produced microphones. And I have a cup and I have a house to live in. I have food today. And these people may have been very involved in producing all of these things. Yeah. So I don't exist independent of them. What do they say? Don't bite the hand that feeds you. So if sentient beings are kind and our life is dependent on them, then we have to reciprocate with some kind of kindness in return, even though we may find what they say and do horrific. Yeah? And so to be able to have an attitude in which we can distinguish, what is virtuous and what is not virtuous and call that out, but also realize that people who are not virtuous are not evil. Yeah. And that they still benefit us in many ways. And that meeting this kind of situation where I feel so completely disgusted by, that letter, that is my Bodhisattva in training lesson. Yeah. That every time I meet some kind of difficulty, it's, I say I want to be a Bodhisattva. Well, here's Bodhisattva 101. And let's deal with this situation and find a good way to deal with it while keeping a virtuous mental state. Yeah. Because without these difficult situations smacking us in the face, there's no way we're going to be challenged to really grow. Yeah. And instead, we'll just stay very peacefully, Oh, the Lamrim says there's 3 kinds of generosity. They are 1, 2, and 3. And there's 3 kinds of ethical conduct, 1, 2, and 3. And the third one is the ethical conduct of benefiting sentient beings. And it has 11 subdivisions, 1, 2, 3, 4. And, and we can recite all this stuff. Yeah. And we can, unless we're challenged, we just go through life reciting this stuff, thinking that we understand it. Yeah, thinking, believing that we can practice it. And it's only by these situations of, that then we get a chance to practice, and see, how capable am I of putting what I've been studying into practice? How much do I really believe it? And to what extent do I just revert to my old ways and get upset and angry or discouraged and disparaging? Yeah? So these kind of difficulties they're very good for our practice. Yeah. Yes, they aren't so much fun when they come up, especially when you haven't scheduled them in and they arrive in a very bad time where you have lots of other stuff going on that you have to attend to. And these things just kind of come, and you got to deal with it. So these situations are, our Bodhisattva in training practice. Yeah. So instead of going, ay, 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 we go, oh, thank you. Not thank you for saying those horrible things and having conspiracy theories and being anti-Semitic, but thank you for challenging me, to really put in practice what I say I believe in. And so sometimes in that effort to put into practice what we say we believe in, we succeed. Sometimes we get a little bit there, better than before, and sometimes we fall flat on our face. Yeah, and when we fall flat on our face, we pick ourselves up. We go back in our meditation, how did my mind get so uncontrolled, or how did my mouth get so uncontrolled? And, what can I do now? How can I transform my mind? How can I see this situation? Yeah. And so even if at the beginning we hit our nose on the ground, then later we go back and we review and we try and learn from the experience. Because for sure, these kind of experiences are going to happen again. 100%. You don't need to go to the fortune teller and pay a lot of money. For sure, these things will happen. Why? Because we live in cyclic existence, and cyclic existence is under the influence of ignorance, afflictions, and polluted karma. Yeah? So of course we're going to face more stuff like this. So we got to deal with it sometime. Yeah? So if we deal with it now and we keep training now, then when we become bodhisattvas, it won't be so difficult. If we don't deal with it now, we probably will never become bodhisattvas, and we'll either become crybabies or very angry, bitter people. So, what do you want to be? A crybaby, an angry, bitter person, or a bodhisattva? It's like those are the three choices. Which one do we want to become? Yeah. So I find that very helpful, whenever my mind doesn't want to do something or whatever, to say, okay, well, what other choices do you have? Yeah. And then, to look at that, what other choices do we have? Either I have the choice of doing things as I've always done them in the samsara, which has just perpetuated my samsara, or I can try doing something different. Yeah, it's kind of those two choices. Yeah, this one we had three, Okay, so, yeah, important to think about these things. Nevertheless, I'm thinking that I don't know if Southern Poverty Law Center or Anti-Defamation League have seen this letter. I'm thinking maybe I should forward it so that they're aware of it. and become very friendly with the pastors that, really try and live according to Jesus's teachings. There was a very beautiful photograph of Reverend, I think his name was Manning. He's in charge of the Episcopal Church where the massacre of 9 black parishioners, where they were a couple of years ago, and one of the rabbis from the recent thing, and the two of them apparently met, and they didn't say anything to each other, and they just hugged each other for the longest time. Yeah, because they didn't need to say anything. So that's what we need to create. Yeah, do. Back to reliable cognizers. And this is an important issue for what we were just talking about, because if we start saying, oh, these people are evil, these are this, they are that, is that a reliable cognizer of those other sentient beings? Yeah. When our mind fabricates stories that make somebody else 100% evil, is that a reliable cognizer? Or is that a wrong consciousness? Okay. And so we have to really apply what we're learning here to our various mental states and be able to recognize when we have a wrong consciousness. And actually, we have a lot of them. We think we don't have very many. Yeah? Every time we're angry, it's a wrong consciousness. Every time we're filled with clinging and attachment, it's a wrong consciousness. Every time we're arrogant, every time we're jealous, these are all wrong consciousnesses. Yeah. But we think they're just, natural human states and everybody has them. Well, yes, everybody has them. That's why everybody's in samsara. Yeah. So somebody said it recently, just because everybody does it doesn't mean it's good. Just because it happens a lot doesn't mean it's good. Mm-hmm. I think, remember the story, The Emperor Has New Clothes? Yeah? That story's quite profound. Yeah? Yeah, many of the things we learned as kids were not so good. Many of the fairy tales were quite violent. Yeah. But that one really had some wisdom behind it. Did you discuss the other two questions? Okay. So let's go to number 3. If you've never been to Antarctica, which of the 3 categories of phenomena is Antarctica in relation to you? Which is it? Maybe let's go through the other questions, and then that will bring some clarity about what it is. Okay. Is it very obscure because you have to depend on another person's testimony to know what it looks like? Yes. Always you have to depend on somebody else's testimony? If you've never gone? Well, what about the next question? Is it slightly obscure because of seeing photographs or a 3D model whereby you can infer what it looks like? Let's pretend it's not photoshopped, okay? Could you learn something about Antarctica by seeing a model, seeing photographs? Can you infer something?
Testimony of somebody else's knowledge.
No, it's different because the testimony of somebody else's knowledge is their words, and so that's getting filtered through their opinions and so on.
So it couldn't be a visual testimony of
Well, you can't see through their eyes. If they show you a picture,
That's what I mean.
okay. Yeah, I don't call that testimony of a reliable person. It's an image, you know. Through an image, can you get some idea? Can you infer something about what it looks like? Yeah. Or what about, would it be evident if you saw it live stream? Does live stream make it evident? Why not?
Yes.
Huh? What?
I'm thinking yes too.
Yes, but wait a minute. When we talked before, listening to teachings through the microphone, through live stream, we decided that that wasn't, coming from the person. It was the machine. When you see something on the computer live stream, what is the evident phenomena? The screen is the evident phenomena. Yeah, the screen is the evident phenomena. I think glasses would count as evident, making something evident because it's quite direct. Yeah, well, that's another thing with a telescope or a microscope. I think there you're going into inference. It would seem to me.
If you have a photograph, right? Somebody tells me that's a photograph of Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the photograph or the Arctic Circle. I have no clue whether or not that actual photograph.
Okay, let's assume it's a reliable photograph. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But no, because the photograph is different than the person. The reliable authority is the person who's describing it because they have knowledge of it. Yeah, the photograph or the model is different than the person's description. Okay? When you see the photograph or model, you're having a direct perception of that. And from that, you're inferring what Antarctica looks like. When somebody's describing it to you, your only direct perceiver there is the sound of what they're saying. And then you're creating images in your mind. What is more reliable, the photograph or the image you create in your mind? The photograph is.
You still take the photograph on authority that someone tells you what it was.
Yes, of course. Here we're assuming that, this is somebody, that it's not a photograph from, from InfoWars and, okay.
Just a mistake.
Okay. So it's you can see there's quite a bit of discussion here about it. Yeah. We'll keep reading. Yeah. Just because we haven't been to Antarctica, that eliminates it being an evident phenomena to us. But is it slightly obscure or very obscure?
I guess the question is also, what are we trying to ascertain about Antarctica? That it exists is one thing, that there is a specific landscape is something else, that there are details about it is something else altogether.
But just getting some idea of what it looks like. I mean,
If that's it, if just getting some idea of what it looks like is what we're looking for, then that's different than what we were discussing, I think.
Well, I'm thinking, usually, when somebody says, what's Antarctica like, you're thinking of what a general description. You're not asking about, every single ice shelf and how deep it is and this kind of stuff. Okay, anyway, let's keep going on. You can continue to discuss this in the break time. Yeah, it'll keep you from gossiping. Yeah. So, no, I'm quite serious. Continue to discuss this and think about it. How do you know things? Yeah. And what do you trust more? Yeah. If somebody shows you a photograph, do you trust that more than a person's description of what it's like? Okay. If you see an accurate model of something, do you trust it more than somebody's description of what it looks like? So think about this. Okay, it'll give you some clues. Okay, so now we're going to get into the 7 kinds of awareness. We're only going through this, some of it quite quickly, and not in a very deep way, because there's actually 2 viewpoints here. There's Dharmakirti's viewpoint. He's one Indian sage, 6th century, 7th century.
He was born in 600.
Yeah, 7th century. And so he was, yeah, it says that right in the book. Yeah, so what's more reliable, my memory or what I see on the page? Okay, so he presented things from a certain perspective. Chandrakirti came along in the 8th century and presented these things from a different perspective. Yeah, when we usually learn this in the Tibetan monastic system, we learn it from Dharmakirti's perspective because that's the perspective in which most of the texts on this topic were written. Okay, as you keep on studying, then later they tell you Chandrakirti's, but they're different. And when you get really used to Dharmakirti's, and then you hear Chandrakirti's, and then you look and read a book where it's Dharmakirti's, or where it's Chandrakirti's, and then you say, it's wrong, but it's not. It's a different presentation. Okay. It's the same way if you happen to study paths and grounds as they're usually taught in the Tibetan monasteries. It's usually from the viewpoint of the Yogacharya Svatantrika Madhyamaka. And then if you study it from the viewpoint of the Prasangika, it's different. Yeah. One geshe was telling me that one time he was at the teachings and His Holiness was talking about something from the Prasangika viewpoint that they usually study in the monasteries from the Yogacharya Svatantrika Madhyamaka viewpoint. And he heard 2 monks, who were still studying their classes, say, oh, His Holiness made a big mistake here. It's not like that. And the friend who told me said, that's because they were studying in that class and they hadn't learned the teachings that came in the more advanced, the classes that came ahead. Okay, anyway, there's still something very good to learn from Dharmakirti. Ancient Indian religious practitioners from many traditions discuss the topic of reliable cognizers at length. So this already shows that this is a very important topic. In ancient India, you had all these non-Buddhist schools and plus Buddhist schools, and they were all discussing the same issues, but of course taking different viewpoints. So for the Buddhists, in establishing their viewpoints in things, it wasn't always what, the Buddha didn't necessarily talk about these kinds of perceivers and so on in the Pali Canon. But, based on what they learned there, then the Buddhist sages in ancient India set forth a Buddhist perspective, which was often in response to what the non-Buddhists were saying. Okay, so the non-Buddhists at that time influenced a lot the topics that were taught, that were explored in Buddhist texts. Yeah. So it's quite interesting to give you an example. The Samkhya was one ancient school. And so the Tibetans, it's not the Tibetans, the Indians go through so much refuting the Samkhya view. This and this and that and that. And if you say this, that's wrong, and da 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 da. They never explored whether things happen or if they're predetermined or if there's free will. And, exploring predetermination and free will, that's a big topic in Western theology. Huge. They don't even deal with it in Indian texts. Yeah, because that wasn't something that was a big deal to them. Yeah, whereas it was a big deal here. The Samkhyas, which we never heard of and aren't refuted in college philosophy courses, were a big deal in ancient India, and so they were refuted. So a lot of this system of pramana, or establishing reliable cognizers, it came up in relationship to whatever else was going on in ancient India at that time, such as the other non-Buddhist schools. Okay, so that's important to understand that there is a historical perspective, a historical element, a cultural element to all these kinds of things. Okay, Dignaga, who lived late 5th and early 6th century, and Dharmakirti, who lived 7th century, were the two foremost Buddhist sages in India involved in debating this topic with non-Buddhists and in establishing the systems of epistemology and logic studied by Tibetan Buddhists to this day. These topics of epistemology and logical reasoning are learned not for the sake of philosophical speculation or abstract theory, but for the purpose of actualizing human goals, in particular nirvana. So an important point when we're studying this, it's not intellectual knowledge, it's not so that we can just talk about a bunch of philosophy. It's in order to help us actualize our spiritual goals. So we have to keep coming back that's our reason. Yeah, because otherwise it's so easy for the mind, for other reasons to come in. Okay. Dharmakirti said in his drop of reasoning, since correct or reliable cognition is a prerequisite for achieving all human purposes, I shall explain it. So that's stating the motivation right there. In monastic universities, students are first introduced to the topic of reliable cognizers in the context of the 7 types of awareness, which is taught from the Sautantrika point of view. As we will see, some of these 7 are reliable cognizers, others are not. Okay, so the first one here is a direct perceiver. So that's an awareness that knows its object directly without a conceptual appearance of its observed object. And direct perceivers do not involve thinking, imagining, or remembering. So this is according to the Sautantrika. The Prasangikas have a different meaning for direct perceiver. Also, yesterday the question came up whether all functioning things could be known by direct perceivers. And yes, they can. There are 3 kinds of direct perceivers according to the Sautantrikas. The sense direct perceivers, they're not going to know subtle impermanence. Okay? The mental direct perceivers, which they say happen very quickly, they aren't going to know it. Yogic direct perceivers are the 3rd kind of direct perceiver, and they will know subtle impermanence directly. Okay? Sometimes when we say direct perceiver, our mind just thinks sense direct perceiver, but that's not the whole thing.
Sort of
Yeah, they do. Yeah. But that's refuted later, so I don't usually talk about it so much. But we could. Yeah. Do you believe in self-knowers?
No, but the Antarctica do.
Yeah, they do.
They insert force.
4, excuse me. Okay. Then the second kind of cognizer is an inferential cognizer. That is an awareness that correctly understands its observed object through a conceptual appearance, a mental image of the object, and by means of an inference. Okay, so it isn't just all conceptual consciousnesses. An inference involves reasoning, yeah, and so you know something by a reliable inference, which must be a correct argument. Arguments using spurious logic are not considered inference. Okay, so we have to know something through a correct inference, but that knowledge is a conceptual consciousness. Which, by the way, for the people doing things in studying the Thursday class, I was thinking a little bit more about why they say that conceptual appearances are permanent. If you said that they were impermanent, then what direct perceiver would perceive them? You can't say a sense direct perceiver perceives a conceptual image. Yeah, a mental direct perceiver doesn't. A self-knower doesn't. A yogic direct perceiver doesn't. So you see, you get really stuck. Because if you say it was impermanent, then according to the Satantrikas, your whole system would get rattled, because you would lose how do you distinguish then a conceptual consciousness from a direct perceiver? Okay, then the third one is a subsequent cognizer. Okay, so that's an awareness that realizes an existent object that has already been realized. So, from the, it's the second moment onwards following a conceptual or non-conceptual reliable cognizer. So, moment has different meanings according to the context. When speaking of cognizing objects, it refers to the period of time needed to ascertain the object. It does not refer to the smallest unit of time, because to ascertain an object, a series of smallest units of time is required. Okay, so this is the second moment following either a direct perceiver or a subsequent inference. The second moment onward of a cognizer uninterruptedly follows the first moment. So it's not like you have the first moment, you go to make a cup of tea and come back and have the second moment. Okay, it follows right onwards. Yeah. For example, the second moment onward of a sense-reliable cognizer of blue, or the second moment onward of an inferential reliable cognizer realizing the emptiness of the person. Okay, so when you're sitting there, and you look at the green of the tablecloth, the first moment is the first moment, and then you're still looking at it. So your eye consciousness, the second moment onward, is considered the subsequent cognizer. Okay, if you're visualizing the Buddha, or you have, the example here was you have an inferential reliable cognizer of emptiness. Yeah, the first moment is the first moment. The second moment is a continuity of that. Okay, and Dharmakirti and Chandakirti say have very different opinions about the subsequent cognizer, which we will get to. Okay, the fourth is correct assumption. So that is a conceptual awareness that correctly apprehends its object as a result of having read or heard an explanation of it, but does not fully or firmly grasp the meaning or conclusively ascertain its object. After learning a new topic, we have a correct general idea about it, but because we don't ascertain the meaning, our understanding is not firm, and we could change our mind later. Okay, so we just got done talking about the 4 seals and the 2 truths. So, I think for most of us, this is material that we haven't ascertained, excuse me if I'm imputing things on you that may not belong there, but I'm speaking about myself. So, but you have a rough general idea about it. Yeah? And it's it's more or less correct, but you don't really get it. Because if somebody came along and asked you a question, you go, okay. Or you might change your mind if you're presented with another idea, because you don't really ascertain it. You're not really realizing it, knowing it in a firm way. Okay, so a lot of what we believe is correct assumption. Yeah, it's correct assumption. We don't know it for sure. Yeah.
As I've practiced more, I've realized that my understanding of the Dharma is mostly a correct assumption.
Yep.
Before, I thought I had realized it.
Yes.
But it's shocking to see that, oh, wait, there's a gap still.
Yeah,
What
that's
is
showing that you're getting smarter.
Good.
Okay, when you realize how little you know, you're getting smarter. Yeah, when you think you know a lot, then you're in trouble. Okay, so it's true, so much of our understanding is just correct assumption. Yeah, we don't really get it. And you can tell by the fact that we don't always live our life according to it. Okay, we talk about karma. Oh yes, I believe in karma. I need to abandon non-virtue, create virtue. Yes, this is very important. And then when a situation arises where it's to our advantage, we don't lie. We just we have alternate facts. To quote somebody famous. Yeah. But we have alternate facts, don't we? Don't we? Are we little angels that always tell everything factually? Okay. So, we have our own set of alternate facts that come up when convenient. And yet we still profess, oh yes, I believe in karma. It's very, very important. Okay? So, what we say and what we do often don't match. And, yeah. And that's because what we're thinking is a correct assumption. It's not, we're not really getting it. Okay, then the 5th one is an inattentive awareness. I think some of you have this during class. What? What kind of awareness is it? Okay, it's a direct perceiver to which its apprehended object clearly appears, but is not ascertained. For example, while engrossed in watching a movie, our auditory consciousness hears the voices of people near us. But later, we cannot say with certainty that the people were speaking or what they were discussing. Okay? So it's kind of, we're perceiving it. It's going in our senses, but we're not ascertaining it. We're not getting it. It's fly by night. Yeah, fly by night. It's like, what's a good example of that? Well, you're sitting here and you're thinking about what's for lunch, or you're thinking about where you came from, or you're thinking about you wish somebody else were here listening to it, or you wish you were with somebody else listening to something else, or something. Yeah. And so, and then meanwhile, there's the sound of the voice here, and it's, okay. That's inattentive awareness. Then deluded doubt is an awareness that vacillates between two or more options and is inclined towards the wrong conclusion. Okay? So, they say everything is all functioning things are as impermanent. But I'm not so sure, because inside myself, I feel like I'm there and there's an essence that's of me that's permanent, and I have a soul that's never going to get destroyed. Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, so that's the deluded doubt. It's like, well, okay, I heard that. Well, maybe, but actually, I'm more inclined towards this. And then a wrong consciousness is not where you're just more inclined towards the wrong view, but you are sure of the wrong view. 100%. Okay? So, so it's either a conceptual or non-conceptual consciousness that incorrectly apprehends its observed object. A hallucination, hearing voices where there are none, is a wrong sensory awareness. Holding the view that impermanent things are permanent, or that what is foul is actually delightful, are wrong conceptual awarenesses. Okay? So we can see we have lots of these, but we don't think we do. Okay, so that's just a general overview of some of the types of consciousnesses we have, or some of the types of knowers. It's not an exhaustive breakdown. So there's many other kinds of knowers, but this is a general thing that gives us something, to really think about when we are walking around during the day. So I suggest, as you start walking, today, as you're walking around, really observe, what is a direct perceiver, what is an inference, what is subsequent cognizer, what is correct assumption, what is inattentive awareness, what is deluded doubt, what is wrong consciousness. And be aware of when you're having these different things, because you may start out, I don't know, you walk in a room, you see a person's face, so you're seeing the color and shape of their face, or you hear them speak, you're hearing their voice, and maybe that goes on for, a few moments, so you have a direct perceiver, you're having a conceptual, you're having a subsequent cognizer, and then before you know it, you're thinking about what you saw, what you heard. Oh, there's that person. Oh, they're really good looking. Oh, gee, I wonder if I could talk to them during lunch without looking too obvious. Or there's that, I hear that person's voice. I don't like that voice. It kind of grates on me. I don't think the person's very nice. Okay. What are those?
That could be your wrong consciousness.
Yeah.
And a conception.
What? Yeah, it could be deluded doubt. It could be wrong consciousness, depending on how much we believed our ideas. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're in the dining room, you're looking at this stuff. Meanwhile, the prayers are going on. Yeah. And your mind is still thinking about that person, And it's like, oh, well, I heard their voice. I don't like them. That's not really fair of me to judge that person based on their thing. Om Hong, great compassionate protector. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should be more open-minded and talk to them some more, through purity, freeing from attachment. Yeah, like that, okay? So then what's that?
Inattentive awareness.
Inattentive awareness. Okay. Yeah. So very interesting to observe during the day. And so practice this as you're walking around, observing what kind of cognizers you have. Mhm. Okay, now we're going to go into reliable cognizers and unreliable awarenesses. Okay, so we just talked of 7 kinds of awarenesses. Now we're going to start putting them in 2 other categories: reliable cognizers that will help us accomplish our purpose, and unreliable ones that won't. Okay, so Dharmakirti, who wrote from a Sautantrika and Chittamatra perspective, he wrote from a Tantrika perspective, 1 chapter, a Chittamatra perspective from another chapter. He's said to be in the lineage of Sautantrikas, but he himself was a Chittamatra. Don't ask me. Okay, and Chandrakirti, who taught from the Prasangika Madhyamaka perspective, defined the Sanskrit term pramana differently. According to Dharmakirti, pramana is a prime cognizer, a new and non-deceptive knower. So new indicates that it's the first moment of a non-deceptive cognizer. The following moments in that continuity, knowing the same object, are subsequent cognizers, but are not prime cognizers. So, for Dharmakirti to be a prime cognizer, you have to be the first in line. Okay? So it's the first moment knowing the object. And then after that, all the second moments, he says, are not prime, okay, because they're just relying on the first moment. The first moment is prime because it's fresh. It's fresh, it's new, getting at the object in a non-mistaken way. Everything that comes after that is follow the leader. Okay? According to Chandrakirti, pramana is a knower that is non-deceptive with regard to its principle or apprehended object. So you notice that for Chandrakirti, it doesn't have to be the first moment to be a reliable cognizer. And also they translate the term pramana differently, and it's due to the etymology. Yeah, so one etymology of pra, it's of pra, means fresh or new. Yeah, the other etymology is, I forget what it is, but it, huh? Main. Oh, right. Okay, main. Thank you. Okay, so it's a main, it's a knower that is not it knows its main object properly. Okay? So in his commentary on the 400, Chandrakirti says, undeceived consciousness is seen in the world to be reliable cognizer itself. Okay, so just being undeceived, okay, non-deceptive, incontrovertible, regarding its main object, that's good enough for Chandrakirti. Yeah, Dharmakirti wants it to be the first moment. Okay. Non-deceptive means incontrovertible. This knower is trustworthy and knows its object correctly. It does not have to be the first moment of a stream of moments of cognition. It is called a reliable cognizer because it can lead us to accomplish our purpose. Prasangikas say subsequent cognizers are reliable cognizers because they know the same apprehended object as the first moment that preceded it. Okay? So this is a big difference, you know. The Prasangikas say, when they follow Chandrakirti, that the subsequent cognizers are reliable. You know, when they follow the first moment, whereas Dharmakirti says all those other moments, they're not the prime knower. They're not quite as reliable. So it actually makes quite a difference to say that all those subsequent moments are reliable. Because, for example, with an inferential cognizer, well, with any mind, you know, it's then you can trust and rely on not just the first moment, but all those moments. So if you have an inference of emptiness, you know, and you're focused on that, then that is, the whole thing is reliable for however long your mind is focused single-pointedly on that conclusion. Okay? Okay, so in Chandrakirti's clear words, he lists 4 types of reliable cognizers according to the objects to be comprehended. Okay? So the first one is direct reliable cognizers. So they know their objects, evident phenomena, directly and non-deceptively, without depending on a reason or logical mark. Okay? Inference knows its object non-deceptively, but by means of a reason or a logical mark. With an unimpaired eye faculty, we see blue. This is a non-conceptual, direct, reliable cognizer. A subsequent cognizer for Chandrakirti can also be a direct, reliable cognizer. A consciousness correctly remembering a conversation we had yesterday is a direct, reliable cognizer, even though it is a conceptual memory of the conversation. Okay, so it's also changing the meaning of direct. Yeah. Similarly, many but not all scholars agree that the second moment onward of an inferential cognizer realizing impermanence is a direct, reliable cognizer, because unlike the first moment of that inferential cognizer, it does not depend on a reason. Although it is considered a direct, reliable cognizer, it does not directly apprehend its object because it is a conceptual consciousness. Okay? So, being a direct, reliable cognizer does not mean that you directly apprehend the object. Okay? So the meaning of direct, in as it appears in that sentence, it has 2 slightly different meanings. Okay? So a direct, reliable cognizer, yeah, so it knows its object correctly, yeah. So it's direct in that respect. It directly knows its object and it's correct. But it does not directly apprehend the object because it apprehends it via a conceptual appearance. Okay. So this, when you first study this, after you've been familiar with the Satantrika, you go, what in the world is he talking about? Yeah. But actually what he's doing is really reaffirming the value of the second moment onward of an inference to really have a strong impact on your mind and to give you reliable information. Okay, so that's a direct, reliable cognizer. And you'll notice some direct, reliable cognizers include conceptual consciousnesses. Then, an inferential, reliable cognizer, they know their objects, which are slightly obscure phenomena, which means, remember, by slightly obscure, that when you initially or first time understand something, it has to be through reasoning. Yeah. So the slightly obscure phenomena, they know that's their object. They know them non-deceptively, purely in dependence on a reason or a logical mark. So we know a car is impermanent because it is produced by causes. Okay, so the first moment of an inference, knows the object purely in dependence on a reason. The second moment onward doesn't know it by depending on the reason. It knows it by depending on the first moment. So that's why the second moment onward of an inference can be a direct, reliable cognizer. Okay, then the third is reliable cognizers based on an example. They are inferential cognizers that realize their object by understanding that it is similar to something else. Here, an evident phenomena, such as an example, analogy, or model, is used as the reason to understand the meaning, which is slightly obscure. Okay, for instance, the potala is a slightly obscure phenomena for people who have never been to Lhasa. You could substitute Antarctica there. Okay? It's a slightly obscure phenomena for people who have never been to Lhasa. But if someone shows them a model of the potala and says it looks like this, they will understand what the potala is. Okay? Then the fourth are reliable cognizers based on authoritative testimony. So they're inferential cognizers knowing very obscure phenomena that cannot be established through direct perceivers or other inferential reliable cognizers, but only by depending on the authoritative testimony of a trustworthy source, such as a credible person or a credible scripture. For example, we understand the subtle workings of karma by relying on a credible scripture taught by the Buddha, who is a reliable person. Okay, let's stop here. And, in the break times, go through these. We have the list of 7, kinds of awarenesses. And then we have this list of 4 types of reliable cognizers. So just try and familiarize your mind with those. Okay? Yeah?
Are you saying that you're saying then that for the third one there, that a photograph would be like an example?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And can I ask one other question that you can answer later? I was interested in these 7 that they switched the word from some of them in the other book we've been studying were either a appearing object or a engaged object, but here they switched it all to a observed object or object of observation in the definitions.
Yeah.
And I was looking that up the other day, and I remember Jeffrey saying there wasn't any definition of object of observation or observed object. Is that your understanding too? Because it seems like he asked the question which always stuck with me, and I found it yesterday. He says, in what sense are you observing an object of observation? And the reason he asked the question is because by our understanding of that is an object of observation is existent. But what you're observing is not an existent. If you're observing everything I'm seeing is I'm seeing everything as inherently existent, and inherent existence doesn't exist. So does that mean that the sense that I'm seeing an observed object is as a veiled truth?
Yes.
I mean, okay, but then...
Yeah, you're seeing a veiled truth.
But his question still kind of stands. In what sense are you observing?
Well, observed object, if it's a translation for migpa or migyul, it just means the main, kind of the main object there, the one that you're looking at. Okay? It doesn't have don't get befuddled by the word observed. Yeah, it can mean, the seen object, the observed. Yeah, it's not something special. Yeah. Okay. I mean, according to Prasangika, you're the object that you're observing, or what you're seeing is you're seeing it through the veil of inherent existence. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, for Prasangika, everything that we're seeing with our senses is mistaken. Yeah. They're all mistaken, but not mistaken in the way that Dharmakirti's talking about mistaken. Yeah. There's a difference between, they use some words interchangeably. I really try when I write to separate out mistaken and erroneous. Sometimes when they write, the Tibetans, they use mistaken also to mean erroneous, but I think it's clear if we really try and keep the meanings separate. Yeah, I'm finding in many things where you think that they would have two words, they have one word that counts for two very different meanings. Yeah. I didn't see this before, so I will look at these and then answer them next session, okay?